Hey Bookworms, welcome back to my channel and to another video in my Halloween series. This year I'm reviewing classic Victorian horror novels, and this is the fourth video in this series that doesn't have a name, unfortunately. But after you're done with this video, make sure to check out the other videos on this subject. They'll all be linked in the description box. So today I am continuing with another character from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Sorry, I had to. Don't worry, I know the Dorian Gray only appeared in a movie, but the coincidence wasn't lost on me, especially considering I also reviewed 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea recently. But today I will review The Invisible Man by A.G. Wells, which is about an invisible man. How surprising. But seriously, this isn't a twist-ending revelation considering the title of the novel. This book is about a man who is invisible, who wreaks havoc, first in a little town, and then pretty much wherever he goes. We know he is flesh and blood, but he is wicked and obviously has the upper hand in a fight. So how do you catch and stop something you can't see? That was surprisingly a quick synopsis, so let's continue with this notion, and let me say I really enjoyed this novel and finished it very quickly. If you've seen the other videos in this series and the books that I talked about, I really liked all of them, but they were more of concept books, using the monsters to speak about social and philosophical issues. This is also quite true here, more on that later, but here I felt that the main idea of the story was, what if someone managed to gain invisibility and used it to hurt other people? This book and the one I'll talk about next week are actually the only ones that really manage to somewhat be creepy or scary, and this book is even on the verge of being body horror. Okay, let's be honest, I don't think many books from the 19th century will actually be able to scare the modern reader, but this one was really close. So if you thought that books can never be as scary as movies, well, you do have a point there, but if you want a good contender, read The Invisible Man. It was very interesting, not very long, and very readable. It even manages to have a great sense of humor in a way that doesn't subtract from its horror. There's a character there called Mr. Marvel that was absolutely fabulous. But as mentioned, it has some really scary moments. The Invisible Man, the character, his name is Griffin, and he's pretty interesting considering he's both protagonist and antagonist. We actually follow him throughout the novel, which is rather unique. But don't get confused, he is definitely the villain here. I did feel sorry for him a little bit, especially after he realizes that he can't go visible again and tells how awful it is to be invisible. The book also has some science in it, and I really liked it. In Frankenstein, for example, we have a scientist who brought a man back from the dead, just accept it, it's a book. But here, Wells does try to explain the process of invisibility and somewhat explain how it was done. But if you ever thought being invisible is cool, Griffin will burst that bubble for you. He can pretty much do anything. He has to hide most of the time, which means to walk around naked, and for the majority of the book he has a bad cold because of that. He can't have any friends or romantic relationships, and he can't even take advantage of the situation and steal stuff because he also has to be super quick, and anything he carries on himself will be seen. So yes, it sucks to be invisible, and you kind of feel sorry for him. Just for a little bit until you remember he's a murderous asshole, and then you stop feeling sorry for him. Now, before I talk about negatives, because I do have some, I do want to talk about the themes of the novel as I talked about them in the other reviews. Horror is a wonderful genre through which you can really tell what was going on with society at the time. One thing that keeps popping up in that contemporary literature has to do with the dangers of scientific progress and how it may ruin mankind. This theme is still prevalent today, but back then it was less about machines taking over and more about how the coldness of science will ruin our humanity. It's also very interesting how each works talk about a different aspect in this issue. But in The Invisible Man, what I found interesting is that Griffin seems to always have been bad. You would have expected to see how being invisible made him evil, but it was always that way. Invisibility just enabled him to be his real self. I found also so many elements in this book that reminded me of the other works I discussed this month. The unwanted harsh consequences of scientific experiments gone wrong, we had that in Frankenstein. The exploration of the inherent evil within us, and how if we had to suffer no consequences, he would reveal himself. That's the picture of Dorian Gray. And of course, the story of a mad scientist who sacrifices himself for his ideas and become the monster of the story. We had that in The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And now I want to write an essay about all that, but we have to move on. So let me tell you about a few things that I liked less about The Invisible Man. As mentioned, Griffin is definitely the bad guy and was always bastard. So I felt it was a bit of a shame we didn't really follow him as expected or the way I would have wanted personally. We do see things from his point of view, but we never see his downfall. This relates to another issue of the book and seems ironically rather cold and standoffish. We never get to really know any of the characters. We just read about them like in a newspaper report. We know their names, their occupations, and they're part of the story, but other than a little bit of pity toward Griffin, I never really felt like I cared about any of them. So if you expect a novel where you can really befriend the characters, then you are reading the wrong book. In addition, I felt like we really get to know Griffin's actual motives and endgame. He seems like one of those people who are just mad at the world, so when given the opportunity, he just decide, screw it, I'll just be meaner to people. Which leads to his bizarre decision to take over the world. Not kidding, Griffin decides to start a reign of terror. Like, what? This came out of nowhere and was one of the strangest decisions I've read recently. Like, how? Why? Angry at your situation? Let's kill everybody! It could have been interesting though, but this just comes out of nowhere and pretty much leads nowhere except proving that Griffin is indeed the monster of the story. But to conclude, it was a really interesting story. This was my first H.G. Wells novel and I really want to read more. It was interesting, it was a very fast read, and despite having some really interesting themes, its main point was to tell a scary story, and I felt it succeeded. This novel got many movie adaptations throughout the years, the latest was in 2020. I felt it's really an overrated film, and it was also very different from the book, so in case you've seen the movie and wondered about the book, that's that. I thought it was cool that they took it into a different direction, but I just didn't like the film. I also didn't see the Kevin Bacon film, in case you wondered, because I was 12 when it came out and the trailer really scared me. But now I'm curious, and I have a feeling it will be a more loyal adaptation to the book. Let me know if you've seen it. Anyway, guys, that was my review on The Invisible Man. Thank you very much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Also, help me not to be invisible on YouTube by commenting on this video. Share what kind of superpower seems really cool to have, but is actually a nightmare. Guys, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time when I review the last book in our Victorian series and join a woman living in a haunted house. Until next time, bye bye.